Hey, Kelvin. Hey, Bones. How's it going? Hope you guys are doing well. We'll get started in about 3 minutes, maybe 4. Hey, Justin. How's it going? Hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for swinging through. I think Peter and Anthony, hopefully David will be here today. And obviously, the guest, Julia, come and join Car Talk, Garage Talk. AB Games, how's it going? Give us a couple minutes as we get started. I'm going to keep saying the same things. Hopefully you guys don't get super annoyed with me. Okay, Peter and Julia. Hey guys, I'm inviting you to co-host. Guess should have just gotten. Okay, Julia's in. How's it going, Julia?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. Peter, are you in?
I am. Richard, Julia, how are you both?
Good. I am so deeply impressed that we're early. I feel like that's not a normal thing on Spaces. I'm always a 2 minutes early kind of girl, so I'm just, this is awesome.
You've caught me on a good day. Not normal for me.
That's all right. This is the right time. Time to shine, right?
Yep, absolutely. Super excited to have you, Julia. I know we are a little bit early, so maybe we'll take a few minutes before we dive in. But Julia, do you have any announcements? Richard, do you have any announcements? I think we should kind of touch on off the side.
Go follow Julia. She's awesome. Big thanks to Julia for coming and joining the Spaces. We're trying to do this every week with new people and surface really incredible people from the racing community to our group and to our community. So big thanks to Julia. Go toss her a follow. Other than that, nothing for me. I'm in San Francisco, so I was able to take the ferry in this morning, which is like a cool little experience. That's the only announcement I'd like to make. What about y'all?
You brought the heat wave. It sounds like it's been pretty brutal.
What kind of heat are we talking about?
Oh, it's 80 here.
Oh, wow. That is warm.
Yeah. Yeah, Julia, where are you right now?
I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we have these, sorry, I'm just tweeting something out real quick for this space. We have a handful of weeks a year where the weather is truly delightful. And we're talking, like 50s overnight, 70s during the day, no humidity. We currently are in that phase. In about 3 weeks, it's going to start getting really humid and uncomfortable. And that will last through December. So I'm taking in this glory that is the South in the early spring.
Oh, fantastic! Now, are you from there? And what brought you to that?
No, I am from New York City. I grew up on the Upper West Side, right by Central Park, and we can get into more of this in a little bit. But I made the switch from Formula cars and road courses over to more NASCAR style when I was 16, I want to say, and so Charlotte is kind of the headquarters for NASCAR. Most of the teams are based, within an hour of Charlotte. And so that is why I moved here after graduating from the Bay Area.
Oh, that's right. I feel like I knew that. It was in the back of my brain.
That's all right. Lots of details.
I'm gonna blame it on the heat here. Well, actually, maybe we could just dive in. I would love to understand how somebody from New York City gets into racing. Did you spend a lot of time at Watkins Glen? A lot of 4-hour there for our back road trips, or were there?
Yeah, no, good question. So I think my dad, when my parents grew up in New Jersey, and I think when my dad wanted to race, or when he was younger, he wanted to race and wasn't allowed to. And so I think, by the time they had me and my two siblings, and we were all like of competent childhood age, they were looking for activities that would allow us to stay together as a family on the weekend. I know my dad always liked racing. I grew up watching Formula One, and they did some track days in their own cars. And so, yes, we did go to Watkins Glen and stay at the Glen Motor Inn right on the water there. And but they had heard about this go-kart track, Oakland Valley Race Park, which is where Marco Andretti raced, Paulie Haraka, and we went there, and I did well in a go-kart. And then, so my sister and I raced the first year, and then my brother joined us the next year, and that just became our life all of a sudden. And it was really, really cool because, I think for me, it was really exciting to have this activity where it was this human machine interaction. I didn't know that term at the time, but I just really liked that I was this little kid that was maneuvering a machine and, could help make it go faster. And then I could also really mess it up. And there's just so much responsibility that went along with racing. And by the time I was 11 or 12, I had won local championships in the go-karting world. I had started racing and being competitive at the national level. So my parents were like, maybe we got someone who can try to climb the ranks of racing here. And we buckled down and got to work.
Well, is that when you moved over to Skip Barber, or was there a step?
Yeah. So basically, when I was 13, we had read about my friend John Edwards, who he raced in Skip Barber at age 12, and I think he was the youngest person to do that. And he was featured in I think it was like Racer magazine or something. And my parents were like, "Oh, if this guy can do it, our daughter can do it. Let's go." And I wasn't tall enough, so I had to wait till I was the end of being 13, got into the Skip Barber 3-day, and then did their 2-day. And then, funny story is that my first race was at Lime Rock Park in the rain. And it's a notorious racetrack for being really treacherous in the rain. The asphalt is just very old. It's really slippery. I was scared shitless. So it was the first time I'd been in the rain in this kind of bigger vehicle. And I was so cautious that the winner lapped me twice. And I think we all looked at it and was like, why did we decide to get our kid into racing when she is not thriving behind the wheel of a car? I think I was just really scared. And then the next year I won 12 out of the 14 races in Skip Barber and became their first female champion. So it was a really good lesson. Like I knew that I wasn't that bad. I knew that I kind of got a little paralyzed in the fear. And so I worked really, really hard to learn all I could, ask as many questions as I could, get as much feedback, and not make that mistake again.
Yeah. What does that take? That's a massive leap forward in, I don't know, 3 months from the end of one season to the start of the next. Something like that. How do I don't even know how to ask that question because that's just so incredible.
I feel like I know what you're gonna. I feel like you're gonna ask, and I'm not sure I can give you an answer. Again, it's like I never once doubted, because I had been good in the 3-day and in the 2-day advanced racing school. Like I had been fast enough in those. It was just like moving to a big car. I think I probably just got overwhelmed with the new car and the rain, and it was so slippery, and you couldn't see very much. And, a big race car is very different than a go-kart in the rain. And I was 13 years old. So it's just like, you can only handle so much, I guess. And so we did one more race in the winter down in Florida where I did better. And then we did, we had data, we had what they called a computer car, and we had data and could look at it. And this was my introduction to data. And it was really cool because I was able to look at these lines, look at these graphs, and just very clearly see, okay, I need to brake 10 feet later. Do it. And it's just, I learned in that moment and my parents learned that I was really good at getting feedback and applying it. I may or may not immediately go out and put the fastest lap down, but if I look at data or get feedback, I can implement it pretty well. And so that was something that I learned about my driving style early on, and we just tried to get those tools wherever we could.
Oh, that's really cool. This might be an interesting opportunity to kind of switch over to conversation about STEM. and your other interests would come back to
Mm-hmm.
racing. But did you always have a technical mind, or like always like poring over the data, or was that sort of the first opportunity to do so and to apply it?
Yeah,
And how is that?
sorry,
Go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
No, that definitely was the first opportunity to look at data in that capacity. And, for context, at that point, like I had taken geometry in school and I was never bad at the technical subjects. It wasn't something I was passionate about. But as I've gotten older, I have learned that I'm a very pragmatic person. And I don't always look at things in black and white, but it's like, okay, if this is what you have to do to get better, this is clear cut. The more concrete something is, the easier it is for me to build off of it. And that was, with qualifying in racing, that's the same thing. The stopwatch doesn't lie. It's very clear if something might feel better, but if the stopwatch says it's slower, then it's not better. So we have to do something differently. And I'm very good at just efficiently implementing that. And so I think that just, once I learned that I understood the data and it was something very visual that I could see, it just, I ran with that. Again, there are some drivers who they can get in the car and just like through the seat of their pants, just feel exactly where the limit is. And I can't always do that. That's not something that's a super strength of mine. But if I can have a spotter or with enough time, but so it's interesting kind of to be a racer and to realize, oh, there are certain ways that I get faster. There are certain ways that I can really improve. But that was one of them. So we just acknowledge that strength and then focus on it.
Oh, very, very cool. So, I'm curious if I feel like there's this trade-off between being very technical, being able to read data, not really necessarily like having that innate feel of a car, but because you can interpret that data, you can get in and drive anything. Given a little bit of time and some data, you can drive anything fast. You feel like that's accurate, or
I think that's
is it a little bit different?
I think that's a decent analysis. I think, and I don't want to like kind of make it seem so extreme. It's like I can also feel what the car is doing, but I do think that if you're able to adjust and if you, throughout my whole racing career, I've raced so many different types of cars, from go-karts to skip barber to Formula BMW, which is really high downforce, to Ford Focus midgets, which are high center of gravity, kind of minimal treaded tire sometimes, to a stock car, to a spec Miata. So I think in changing so many cars so regularly, you get a little better at adapting, but then also having the data, you are able to do well. But that being said, not every racing series that I raced in has data. So like the minor leagues of NASCAR that I was really racing in 2016, 2017, when, was competing for wins there, that was done without data. That's where I really had to put my big kid pants on and say, all right, well, I don't have my tool here. How am I going to get better quicker? And it's a lot of experimenting. It's a lot of communication and feedback with the spotter and the coaches and just trying things. But I think it is really cool to get in a lot of different kinds of cars and just see how different they are. And you have to be kind of analytical about that. Like, where's the motor? Is it in the front of the car or the back of the car? How is that going to affect when you're going into a corner versus, when you put the power down, what's the characteristic or the handling of the car going to be like? So there's just, it's this really, really cool 3D puzzle that you get to put together in a very short period of time at high speeds.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, one thing I'm thinking right now is that Mark Donahue's book. There's a biography of Mark Donahue. I'm trying to recall the title of it, but so much of what you're saying reminds me of his experiences. The guy would drive anything and everything. Super technical guy, engineer. You could put him in anything, and it would take him some time, but eventually you'd figure out how to go fast. And I think that there's something really special there. And you haven't spent time in just one car. Like, to your point, you have driven just about everything. I am kind of curious what challenges arise when you go from a high downforce BMW with data to minor leagues NASCAR. That was like back to back, right?
Yes. Yeah, basically. It's interesting. And I think also at that time I was still so young, right? So I went from skip barber, which is not a lot of downforce. The car slides around a bit, to a car that was heavy downforce, heavy tire, and minimal power. So it was like completely different, and that took a while to get used to. But then to switch over to something like a Ford Focus Midget, which I did on oval, so it's like little quarter miles in this whole new car. It was kind of just a reset, and I was 16 years old at the time, so I think my brain just absorbed quite a bit. And I mean, I asked a ton of questions. One of the things I learned with one of my coaches in the K&N, what's now the ARCA West series in NASCAR, was like I was asking my spotter for feedback and like constant communication just so I could get up to speed as quickly as possible. And he was a 3-time champion himself in the series. And he was like, man, if my spotter ever talked to me that much, I would rip out the radio. Like, I don't know how you hear all that and don't get flustered. And it just goes to show just there's so many different ways that our brains work and how we process things. And some people just need to be in the zone and silent. Some people need to be in the zone hearing feedback. And it's really interesting how important being very clear on what your expectations are in the communication. That's just super important.
Yeah, very, very cool. And then we're probably going to talk about a decent amount of racing today because I think your background, your story is fascinating. And then we'll get into some other stuff. But you haven't raced just in this country either. You've spent a decent amount of time overseas. I'm curious, what that experience is like. Like, is there something challenging to leaving family, leaving a bit of a support network behind?
Oh, let me tell you, because this was during 2020 when I raced in the European NASCAR series. And I was so excited because in 2019, some of the folks at NASCAR were like, I think you'd really like this series over there. It's road courses. It's like lightweight, higher performance stock cars. And went over or signed the contract. And then obviously COVID hit. So they condensed our season down to 3 months from September to December in 2020. And because travel was so up in the air then, my boyfriend, who's French, his family lives over there. And so they very graciously offered to house me for 3 months. They do not speak any English. So I was learning French. And, on top of that, there was all of the stress of what the travel requirements were going to be. We obviously were testing before the races. It was so stressful. And that being said, getting on track was some of the most fun I've had in a really long time. I mean, the tracks that we went to, we were in Valencia, which is just such a beautiful racetrack and such weird off-camber corners that were really hard in winter lighting. Like the light was really low, so that made that a little more challenging. But we did things like Zolder, and we were at Vallelunga in Italy, and it was just so cool to be in a European paddock. It's not like too different from what you see in the States, but it was really fun to kind of have everyone in their own languages. It was a different kind of energy, and it was so much. It felt a lot more professional than a lot of the minor league racing I'd done here, and so it was like cool to have garages, and it was really great to. For me to race in a series where you have to be super clean. I think that's something that's really interesting with U.S. NASCAR racing is that you're not penalized for bumping and banging. Contact is part of the sport, but in the European NASCAR series, if you cause a preventable collision, like you get penalized for it. So I really like that because I think that's where a lot of the skill and the craft comes in. It's where like, okay, you might be faster than someone, but can you get by them? Can you implement that racecraft? And I think it's a lot more challenging than bumping someone out of the way. So I loved it. And that's not that's just the different nature of the different cultures.
Yeah.
And so having gone my start in open wheel stuff, it just felt more natural to me. And it was so much fun. It would be so much fun to go do another season of that. It didn't work out for 2021 because the team didn't race there again, but European racing is really cool.
Yeah, and I would assume you would every weekend or every other weekend there was a new track for you. You had never driven at those tracks before first practice.
Correct.
As opposed to, I would assume, the States, you had experience at least some of the tracks, past experience before the next race. What is that like to learn a new track? Would you spend a bunch of time in a simulator, or you pour over last season's data? What is that from someone else? What is that like?
That's a great question. So with that season in particular, I watched I rewatched a lot of the previous races to see what the competitors were like, because it's multifaceted, right? There's learning the track, and you can learn that from watching video. I was able to do a little simulator work before I left the States. I didn't have one while I was over in Europe, but was able to kind of get a feel for the track. The engineers also sent over data from their previous experience at the track. So that was super helpful because I had the in-car footage from them. I knew what my braking zones were. Again, it was pouring over that data. But I think some of the hardest stuff to get used to was like the style of the different racers. Because in any season, you know who the clean racers are. You know who the like crazy, really dangerous drivers are who are
The
inconsistent.
rookie.
Rookies or just people who are balls to the wall, like they're going to just not be consistent, not be reliable. And so that was the harder thing to get to know. And because we had COVID protocols in place, like I would know who the cars were and what the numbers were, but like didn't always know who the people were. And like the pictures they had online may or may not match what they looked like then. So it was interesting just kind of almost going in blind, not really knowing who you're racing against. But so that was a big part of it. And it was really challenging for the first race of the season because I couldn't go over for preseason testing because it would make my stay in Europe longer than the 90 days that I was allowed, and couldn't reliably go back and forth. And so I showed up to Vallelunga with I didn't have my seat fitted yet. Like we had to pour my seat the day before our practice started. And that was a rough one. It wasn't my finest performance, if I'm 100% honest, but got almost up to the top 5 for a while. But yeah, it was really hard. It's asking a lot, but that's part of the challenge, and that's part of what makes it so satisfying.
Oh, that's a phenomenal story and really fascinating. These are the parts about racing that we rarely have access to. We turn on F1 TV on Sunday morning and watch a race for 2 hours and think, oh, like these guys just do this for a living. They do it every day. This is just their job. But there's so much else to it, and to consistently rise in the ranks to the next series. Those are not challenges that many of us are exposed to or know about. So that's Julia, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I think that I would love to talk racing with you forever. This is awesome, but I know we had a whole bunch of other topics listed, but maybe before we switch over, any other tidbits, experiences, just fun or like odd stuff from your racing past that you want to touch on before we switch gears?
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens, but put on the spot. I'm gonna have to think about it. If I think of something, I'll jot it down for the end, for some like parting stories, because there's so much stuff that happens. Actually, I do have one story, and this is not to make Skip Barber look bad, because they are not bad. They are great, and I really appreciate racing with them. But there was one stretch of a few races where their cars, which are arrive and drive, and a lot of people drive in the cars, they were having an issue with parts kind of breaking. And so I was racing at Road America, which is my favorite road course so far. And that's in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. And I had gotten a pretty big lead, which was great because with about 3 laps to go, my shifter knob broke off. I went down into turn 5. I think it's turn 5. Yeah. The heavy braking left-hand turn downhill. Did my threshold braking and started going down through the gears, and it just snapped off and went into my pedals. And I was like, oh shit, how am I going to, like, is my race over? How am I going to finish? And there was just enough of a little stub left on the shifter that I was able to bring it home. And luckily, I think I'd had a 5-second lead at that point. I was able to just barely cross the line in first. And that was one of those, I learned the term pucker factor this year. And so it was one of those pucker factor moments I realized in hindsight.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's a great story. I have a hunch that we're going to see a bit of, well, some similar stories this year with supply chain challenges.
Oh, yeah.
If I understand correctly, only 32 or 33 cars will enter the Indy 500 this year. IndyCar is looking for 3 more cars to fill out the full 36, but lack of parts is a big limiting factor.
So
here.
hard.
So I think we're going to, yeah, it's fascinating. Well, cool. So, yeah, I'm just mulling all that over, Julie. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's an awesome story. Um, so yeah, switching gears, and I apologize for the pun,
Oh, we love a
but
racing pun.
I know
Please
that.
never apologize.
Okay, cool. We'll see if I can come up with some good ones today. But I know that you spent a lot of time this week in Twitter Spaces, podcasts. You've given a decent number of keynotes. I've caught a few of them, but one, I think it's awesome that you're getting to do that. But two, I'm curious if like, kind of what you've learned, if there's anything that's top of mind for you lately, any core themes that are starting to surface from your recent conversations. Maybe give you some space to talk about any of
Do you
those
mean
things.
specifically with related to Web3?
Could be Web3, women in racing, women in STEM. Um, I think you've touched on a lot of those concepts, those
Yeah.
topics. But we could pick one to focus on. Web3 is actually all of those. Web3, women in racing, women in STEM
Cool.
are all pertinent to Garage.
Excellent. Yeah. No, I think it's been a really. I'll start with just the Web3 space in general, and for some background. So I started hearing about them like last spring, like a lot of people, and it was something. Or sorry, not them. I started hearing about NFTs and Web3, and it was something where I was seeing it in the news, and I didn't quite get it, and then I was like, I've got time on my hands. Let me figure this out. And I kind of went in more kind of because I have a photographer friend who was helping introduce me, and so I was kind of seeing it more from a artist perspective, and then I found the whole Web3 world and Discord very overwhelming. There's a lot going on, and kind of took a break, and then I jumped back in the fall with the help of a mentor to kind of identify more communities, right, and more groups that were building up loyal and involved communities around then different NFT projects. And so I've kind of been taking a passenger seat to that and just trying to learn as much as I can. And one thing that I think is super cool about Web3, and, I have plenty of people in my circle who are like, it's just fake, it's a scam. And I don't really view it that way because I think one, it's just a really cool new use case for technology that we've had at our fingertips, right? I think it's always cool to see a new wave of how digital technology is being utilized to create community, to build businesses, to develop partnerships. I mean, it's all really interesting, and and I think what makes it really cool is that I think that there's the room to really have it be equal representation of men and women. It's not yet. A lot of projects are male focused, but it's something that we can all, if we all put the time into learning about, it's available to us. And obviously there are some projects that have a higher financial barrier to entry, and that can make it different. But I'm so inspired by like a lot of college students where Web3 world is like second nature to them, and they're building up these communities and, working with these artists. I think the real mix of technology and art that we're seeing, as well as commerce, as well as just kind of pushing the limits of where utility is. It's just all so exciting. So that gets me really excited. And I think something about Garage, and you see it with other communities as well, is where you take like a niche interest like motorsports, and then or a niche interest like weather photography, whatever it is, and really building out different use cases for it. So I'm going to pause there in case you have any follow up, but I just think it's really exciting.
That's great. I'm concerned I'm going to put you on the spot here, so don't hesitate to pass on this. But you were, I think, like the 50th person to join our Discord. Super. It's early days for Garage, but you were super early. I'm curious what caught your attention. What was it? Was it something about the team? Was it the vision? Was it the convergence of Web3 and motorsport and cars more generally? Like what caught your attention?
Yeah. So shout out to David, who I see is listening. I saw him tweet something. I was like, oh, what is this Garage F1? Let me just see, because I got time. Let me go through Twitter. And I saw you guys, and one, I thought the art was fantastic. I think there's a lot of, I love motorsports. I don't really care for a ton of the motorsports related art that's out there. It's just not my style, whereas I feel like what you have is really pretty. And so that was really cool. And I was also just interested from a curiosity standpoint as to what, you had this original big goal of, buying an F1 team. And it's like, wow, that's a big dream. We love big dreamers. I'm a big dreamer myself. So that was really cool. And then I was just kind of interested. I didn't at the time. I don't think I realized that I was that early. But it was just cool to build. And I saw that there were Stanford affiliates, and obviously we're all part of a big fraternity. Basically, that's always fun to see. So for me, it was a really interesting mix of all of my worlds. And I'm gonna kind of tangent real quick. Part of what I always wanted to do, especially once I graduated from Stanford, was find a way to marry all of the things I found interesting. You know, the tech, Silicon Valley, you know, really kind of forward thinking kind of experience I had in the Bay Area with my love for motorsports, with liking being around cool people. It just all kind of came together. So I was interested in seeing what you guys were about.
Cool. Yeah. Um, I I love these origin stories. That sounds great. Yeah, maybe it makes sense. So you and I had a conversation a few weeks ago, kind of brainstorming through how Garage can support teams, drivers. Um, Going forward, maybe we could chat a little bit more about that and sort of continue the brainstorm. If you're up for it.
Yeah, totally. Uh,
So maybe,
no,
go
you
ahead.
go for it.
I was just gonna maybe try to catch everybody up. So let me see if I can distill this down to like 90 seconds, but it's gonna be a challenge.
Good
Let's see.
luck.
So yeah, exactly. So I've been deep into this garage thing for too long, and so, or maybe not long enough. So we'll see. So just as with garage, we want to marry Web3 and motorsport, find a way to reconnect fans with their automotive heroes. So currently in motorsport, we see sponsors, your big corporate sponsors, sort of sit between teams and fans. We think through Web3 and what Web3, such as DAOs, can bring or is bringing to the world, there's an opportunity for us as fans to say, you know what, we together have knowledge, we have resources, we have capital, and we want to support this team. We want to support this driver, whether it's for a full season or for a singular race. And maybe at some point, this community grows to a degree, our signal grows uh, to a certain magnitude where we could start having equity ownership in teams, in cars, in these automotive assets, motorsport assets, because we have the power to do that as a community, as a group, and leveraging Web3, DAOs, blockchain to define our interest in these projects is not something that has existed before. When you think about community backed or like a Kickstarter model for motorsport, it's too discombobulated. Uh, Community doesn't have initially that fiscal, that financial interest, and ownership is too obscure. But now with Web3, with DAOs, we can say as 100 people or 100,000 people or a million people, for the cost of our F1 TV subscription for the year, we can pool those resources and actually get to a point where a title sponsor for an F1 team or an equity stake in a handful of NASCAR, IndyCar, F1 teams is feasible. And in exchange for that, how amazing would it be to get to talk to a driver before a race or an engineer, chat pit strategy in a private setting for a race, rewatch a race with our driver, on a Sunday night. These are the sorts of things that we as fans can't touch. We have very little, if not no, access to. But through Web3, through the Garage platform that Anthony and I and the Garage team envisions, we think we can get there. We're gonna chip away at it, but very, very confident that this is going to happen. Web3 and motorsport is almost a guaranteed thing. It will happen. We're going to work our asses off to make Garage the venue for that. But that's my attempt at a 90-second summary. I will pause there. Do you want to add anything to that, Julia, or do you want to riff off that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a great job. And I mean, I think what's really interesting, just as an outsider, I'm going to view myself as an outsider here. someone who looks at sports and who looks at motorsports and entertainment and where the world is going, I think we're at this really, the first interesting point was, back a few years ago when there's such a rise of digital media consumption. I think that shifted how a lot of sports interact with their fans. And I think that what's really interesting now is that you have that, but then you have this added layer of utility, you have this added layer of gamification. And the reality is that, not every driver, not every athlete is going to be the best at doing that kind of engagement with people, right? But for the drivers who are and who like the community aspect and the media aspect and the sharing that information, it can be a really exciting space. And I think that goes to team owners also, a lot of teams in a lot of sports, but in motorsports also are run by kind of more old school folks. And I think as we see kind of newer team ownership come in and younger, I think it's going to be really interesting as to what is fair game versus what's not. And again, that's just my somewhat uninformed, somewhat informed perspective, but I think it's a good time. And I think the kind of what we were talking about in our previous conversation, like one thing that'll be interesting to see is, how much the Web3 and crypto world kind of permeates into maybe more old school fan bases. And I think the more that there are additional components, the easier that will be. So if there are kind of like gamification components, if there's an art component, and I think if it's a community that's clearly inviting to all different kinds of people, I think motorsports in general, at least in the U.S., is considered a white guy sport. And it's not always the case. I mean, like NASCAR has a 40% female fan base, which I think many people don't know. And that's just so cool. So I think, kind of having the idea about it's supposed to be inclusive and it's supposed to be exciting for everyone is really important and something that is good.
Yeah, I think we're strongly aligned there. Yeah, on the NASCAR bent with really phenomenal parity men, women, viewers, fans, which is very different from what we see in Le Mans. F1 is improving in light of Drive to Survive, but it's a really NASCAR represents a really interesting opportunity for Garage to get involved more deeply in the sport and to support drivers and teams. So, I don't know, given the time we have left, if it makes sense for us to go into much detail about costs, what it takes to set up a team, what the timeline would look like. But if you have interest in going into that, Julia, that might be really interesting for the community here to hear.
I'm not sure I'm educated enough on the team side to know kind of what that looks like, because it is such a process, and you see that with the Denny Hamlins and Michael Jordans putting together a team. Denny's been in the sport for so long, and it's just such a powerhouse pairing, and it's still such a process. So I don't feel like I can speak organically to that, but yeah, I mean every as I've been transparent about, every driver in the minor leagues is, they need funding to bring to the teams. I think that's a really tough spot for a lot of drivers to be in. And I think being able to kind of deliver ROI in a way that's non-traditional is where kind of the more creative you can be, the more value you can bring. And I think that's where I don't have all answers right now, but I think that in that mindset and having that approach to it is where, really interesting conversations can be had.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And again, coming back to this idea of community pooling resources, what I think how this changes the game. I mean, just imagine a NASCAR, out at Indy or out at Texas or St. Louis, and it has it's just a bright red car, or it's just a black car, or it's just covered in some art, like we do an art car. So by this community coming together and saying, like, this is our driver, this is our team for this race or for a season, separating or eliminating the need for corporate sponsors for a car, for a team, for a driver, again, can really change the game and change the look of the sport. There's an aspect. Oh, go ahead, Julie.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I mean, I think that sounds so cool. And if you think about it in terms of, we're all pulling for our driver, I think, it's not like that's so dissimilar from what's going on right now, right? I'll use the Denny example again, like FedEx, their employees get to root for Denny every race weekend. But to bring together different people who aren't tied together by work, especially since work is diversifying so much for so many people, and people are really changing the working landscape, like it just allows a different group to come together. And I think that's so, so cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I know we're coming up. The last 37 minutes have flown by. We should do this a couple more times, but maybe in the last couple of minutes we have, we had a few questions for you from the community, and I
Yeah.
do want to get to. I'd love to hear how Garage can support you. I know there are a lot of things you're working on now and that you're planning in the future, and I'd love to find a way to help you in that. Um, but maybe before we switch to community questions, anything else you want to share? Other thoughts you have?
I mean, we could keep talking for hours and hours and hours. But I think that, again, like I think this kind of the whole idea of decentralized resources that are coming together and community involvement, and at the end of the day, being realistic about the financial barriers to entry. I mean, with all of that being realistic, I think there's so much cool stuff that can be done, and I think it's definitely a conversation to continue. And um, I feel like kind of with these communities and with the Garage, and it's about kind of we are responsible for creating our own opportunity. And there's no rule book about how to navigate this world. And I think that's what makes it kind of so liberating and so energizing. And obviously something I like about you guys.
Oh, I appreciate the kind words. Let's keep working on this. Let's
Yeah,
make something happen here.
I like it.
Cool. All right. So with respect to questions, so we got one from Bishop. I thought this was a pretty cool question. So yeah, Bishop asks, behind pit walls, is there chatter among drivers and teams on potential for engaging with race fans in the NFT and crypto space? And what have you heard in that area that's of interest?
Yeah, I think it really varies. I think it partially is dependent on series. I think there's a little more in kind of the road course racing world, but I've connected with a few folks who are also part-time racers within NASCAR and other community members, and I think there's a lot of potential for an upswing in the people that are involved, because I think there are so many gamers and there are so many fans that are already on Discord. Like, community is there, and I think as NFTs specifically get a little more streamlined, and they become more accessible, because it is a little bit of a convoluted process right now. I think that there's so much potential, and in ways that aren't already being done. I think you can obviously slap a name on something, you can have association, but I think really building something, there are definitely interested minds. And I think, you're starting to see, little bits of kind of more behind the scenes coming together through various drivers and teams' social media. And I think if Web3 is a way to just build on that so much more in a kind of hub, if you will, for all of that content.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. That might segue well into another question we got around um, your take on professional gaming drivers. So, do you have thoughts on web gaming versus like in your face, in real life racing? And what's that trade off between Sims as the end versus Sims as the means for prepping for an IRL race? Um, Mutual respect there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not a one size fits all answer, because on the one hand, I know plenty of drivers, myself included, who are not particularly good on a simulator. Good enough, but like aren't going to go competing. Like, there are plenty of in real life drivers who are not so good, and then likewise, there are plenty of really phenomenal sim racers who may or may not translate into real life. That being said, I do think there is overlap. I think kind of the ability to take in inputs really quickly, to be very precise in your hand-eye motor coordination is really interesting. I think there are big differences, like the idea if you're used to exclusively having a reset button, I feel like that isn't a good way to go into in real life racing. I think there's also something to be said for, sim racing has gotten so advanced, and you can really simulate, some G forces. You can simulate bumps and everything. But there's still something for just like, are you going to, when there's a little opening going into a corner, are you going to make that move for the pass? Is that going to be the same as in virtual racing? And I don't know. I would assume it's a bit different, but I don't think they have to be in competition with each other. I think a lot of series have really great virtual racing leagues, and I think it's really cool to kind of I believe that some of the iRacing stuff kind of turns winning a championship that's affiliated with NASCAR into like a test day or something in one of the series. Don't quote me on that one, but I think there's some kind of competition aspect to it, and I think that's super cool. But it's an interesting. I don't think they're necessarily always complementary, but I think they can be, and I think, especially as tech gets so much more impressive and fine tuned, it's much more realistic.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, as an aside there, beginning of 2020, when we didn't know if there was going to be an F1 season, and some of those drivers jumping into esports series kind of like kept the fire going for a few weeks before we were able to get started again. So yeah, but it wasn't the same drivers or at the top. Things got mixed up a little bit. So that was fun to see.
Well, and they're different skills too, right? Like it's all racing. It's all kind of, you have to learn the track, you have to learn line, you have to make passes. But 2D versus 3D is a very different skill set and different. I'm totally blanking on my word, but different strengths you need for each.
Doesn't always translate perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So two more questions for you if you have time. So one is, are we going to actually, let me save that one for last. So another question we have is, so we've got a graduating student who's looking for positions in motorsport, especially in engineering, and has found that challenging. I know, I think you were at Stanford, you worked with Riley Brennan, you were in the Revs program. Shout out to Riley if he's here. But yeah, any thoughts there on how someone with deep interest in motorsport engineering background can get into the space, break into the space?
Yeah, I think, the Revs program at Stanford, I wasn't like officially involved in, but I got to speak on a panel with Miles, and it was really, really cool. And it was just, side note, Revs for me was kind of the first real marriage of academia and motorsports and cars that I had experienced. And my nerdy self was just geeking out on that you could put this academic spin on cars. And it was so exciting and interesting, and was a way to view motorsports in a way very different than I had. So anyway, I think that I'm a big advocate for just always asking. And so I think if you want to get involved, you go straight to the team and you send an email, make a call. If you can go to races actually are not the best time, I think, to meet people because everyone's so stressed and focused, but they can be beneficial. But I am a big believer in shooting your shot and sending that email, finding the right person on the team who either is director of performance, or doing your research on who the right person on the team is for the skills that you have, and just sending a note. Motorsports teams, just like companies, need talent, and they're not going to necessarily know about you if you don't make yourself known. And teams do have internships, and especially if you come from a motorsports related program, you can easily cite those credentials. So yeah, that would be my best. I know that there are different motorsports jobs forums. Like I saw one today that McLaren is apparently looking for engineers, and they're going to select 10 people out of this process. So I think following all of the kind of motorsports publications, but it's you got to hustle, and if you can meet people at different events, obviously that in-person networking is always very beneficial.
Yeah, that great answer. It reminds me, I think it went something like this. So Steve Nichols, out of school, he wanted to go work in F1, but he didn't feel like he was ready for it. So he works at a, what was it, like an aerospace materials composites company for a few years. And eventually he reaches out to McLaren and he says, I want to work for you guys. And like hounds them. Eventually has a conversation and with one of the lead designers, and the lead designer sort of hints that they're working on a new material. And Steve Nichols goes, "Oh, you mean carbon fiber?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, no." And Steve Nichols is like, "I do that for a living. Let's figure this out." And Steve Nichols ends up at McLaren, leads design for the first carbon fiber tub in F1, and goes on to design arguably the best F1 car of all time in the MP44 for 88. World championship winning car, like won 15 out of 16 races with Senna and Prost, and that was just over like an 8-year period, something like that. So yeah, I'm 100% with you. Go find those people, hound those people, communicate.
Oh yeah, squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that's a good thing. And also, to your point though about kind of knowing the technology, like know your stuff, be prepared, and just wow them with your knowledge.
Yep, absolutely. Well, cool. So, maybe last question here, Julia, is what are you doing now, and when are we going to see you in a car again? Maybe with that, like how do you think Garage can support you? If I can put you on the spot there.
Yeah, so I mean, right now I haven't announced yet, but I will be doing some part-time racing this year for fun, and I continue to do keynote speaking and trying to figure out how to marry these worlds. And I mean, as you're talking to a driver here, and a driver's number one goal is to get the funding to go racing. So, my number if that's something we want to do. And but I think it comes down to, again, like creating something new that can give value beyond just a driver sponsor on the car. I think it's just so exciting, the potential of what you can leverage from a technological standpoint, from an access standpoint, from a just generally being like, I like engaging with communities, right? I mean, I think it's a natural extension of who I am, and trying to help people get excited about things, because I think people being excited by things is just the most infectious, and that's why we're on Earth, right? To get excited and to pursue things and to learn and to be with like-minded people. And I think in addition, things that I've thought about that Garage and different communities can do, it's bringing people together, it's providing networking opportunities, it's providing community input, it's kind of, to my point, asking questions and asking for what's wanted. So I mean, I think that your goal of helping to sponsor and partner with drivers and teams, I think it is dependent on people, it's dependent on situations, but I think there's so much potential there, and I think it could be really, really exciting to kind of flip the whole, or disrupt the industry in what's been the traditional model to what this new model could be. And who knows, maybe you become the trailblazers for how it's done 5 years from now.
That's the vision, that's the dream. Let's do this.
I love it.
So Julia, thank you so much. I know we are over time. I would love to have you back for another conversation here in the near future. I know you've got a pretty packed schedule, but we are honored and humbled to have you on the team. So and for joining us today. So thank you.
This is so great, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in for this whole time. It's been awesome. I hope it's been exciting. I'd love to hear kind of what you liked most or what you didn't like. It's just interesting to know what's exciting. As a driver, we kind of experience the same thing over and over again. And so it's always interesting to hear what people find particularly interesting. So would love to hear from you guys, and I can't wait to be back.
Let's do it. We'll collect questions and we'll get back to it. So just a reminder, last few things, head over to our Discord, discord.gg/garage. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram. This conversation will be posted in the next few days. And as always, if anybody here knows someone or would like Garage to track down someone for another interview, another AMA spaces, get those recommendations in, and we will try to make all of it happen. But this is super fun, Julia. Thank you, sincerely.
Thank you, Julia.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
Cool.
Peter,
Cool.
one last thing before we hop off. We need to announce the winner of the free mint. I
Good
just was doing the roll on TwitPicker, which went through the people that went and followed Julia, retweeted, tagged people. I'll post a screenshot in the Discord so people know that it's real. I post on the Twitter too. But the winner is Bishop, who's actually one of the question askers. So that ended up working out pretty well.
Amazing.
The fates of RNG
Congrats.
came in our favor. So congrats, Bishop. I know they're here somewhere in the space. So we'll also post an announcement in the Discord.
Cool. Richard, thank you for doing that, and thank you for hosting today. It's always appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, team. Thank
No
you all.
problem.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, y'all.